has. Bill Connelly joins us, ESPN. What was it like to write a couple of books? I want to get into the data in your story yesterday, but what was that like? Is that something you're going to do again?
Probably. The writing process is just kind of fun. I mean, it's, you're at different stage, different amounts of time. I'm used to writing everything pretty fast in a given week because I got to move on to the next piece. But being able to stew on things a little bit was a fun experience. Everything that happens when you're done writing stinks, and I hate it, and it's no fun at all. And I'm not good at promoting myself or anything like that. But the actual writing part is pretty fun.
So college football's second week of the standings came out, the playoffs for, again, the 4 teams. We'll see expansion here sometime soon, whenever that might be. And I got to tell you, I liked the BCS the way it was set up. It wasn't always the right way or perhaps the fair way, or some people didn't like it at all. But it at least to me took some of that human opinion and or perhaps bias out of it. If in fact, so tell everybody what you've done here with the kind of bringing in all the different data, analytics, the BCS and more.
Yeah, basically, I have my own SP Plus ratings, which are a power rating and a predictive thing. So it doesn't really translate to if I wanted to rank playoff teams with it or whatever. Alabama is still like 4th or something. I wouldn't have Alabama 4th in the playoff right now. But I've tinkered with a resume tool, and ESPN's Stats and Info Group has a good resume tool. And I started to realize when I was putting together a playoff opinion piece that let's recreate the BCS formula with the tools we currently have. So took a poll average like what they did back in the day, and used both the power ratings and then also the resume ratings to kind of combine that best versus most deserving piece and spit out rankings that actually top 9 in my little formula were the same as what we saw last night, which I thought was pretty cool.
Bill, do you think this is something that they should do when they go to 12 to make some sense of, especially what's going to be 6 at-large teams?
I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind it. I do, I've seen the dashboard that the committee members get to work with, and it's fine. There's a lot there. But I like the element of let's not pretend that you can come up with a perfect power rating in your own head as you're voting for these teams with all these different factors. Being able to lean on some really, really quality ratings of different kinds. That was never the problem with the BCS to me. I always hated, number one, I just hated, the BCS could only pick 2 teams. That was the biggest problem with the BCS, was that there are a lot of times there are going to be 3 or 4 deserving teams and somebody would get left out. But the formula aspect, I wish we wouldn't have changed the formula every time we disagreed with it, but it was still a good step in the right direction, I thought.
So, if in fact they were to do that, let's say they make the decision to take whatever the committee does, which sometimes drives a lot of people crazy because of the narrative that changes, as you know, every week based on what they want probably to believe. That doesn't mean they aren't doing a good job. Jim Grove's a great friend of ours from the time he came to Baylor for the 1 year, among others, Gene Taylor. But if in fact they added whatever it is you're doing or what others are doing analytically, data-wise, whatever, how much of a percentage should that count?
Yeah, I ended up going with the 2/3, 1/3 thing in this piece, at least, that the BCS was at the end. 2/3 poll average, 1/3 computers. And I think that's fine. It keeps the human element front and center, but that 1/3 is a pretty big influence. And, if you wanted to do a little more in the computer's direction, I wouldn't mind. I thought looking at the results that it produced, going 2/3 and 1/3 still worked pretty well for me.
Bill, I want to go back to what you said about the BCS. I think you kind of hit on something we've talked about. College football is really bad about hearing people going, we don't like the BCS because it's only 2 teams, and they hear, oh, we'll get rid of that robot then. And you're like, no. The robot is friendly. We like the robot. We just want you to give more teams. And
right.
Yeah, did they maybe not realize that they were onto something back then and just had to expand it out from there?
Yeah, you do wonder, because I mean, and again, we saw the human influence part too. Every single time they tweaked the formula so many times through the years, and we'll keep using computer ratings, but we're going to get rid of margin of victory. We don't want anybody running up the score in college football. That's always been the craziest thing to me. Margin of victory is a very powerful tool when it comes to figuring out who's good. and just, setting it all up to where it's, you can only use team A beat team B. That was dumb. But every single time it produced a weird result, a controversial result, which again was usually because they could only pick two teams. They changed the formula to fit what the humans thought, and that was. It was like they had something good, and then they made it worse every single time they got nervous about it or something. So I'm sure that would happen again. People are very, you get yelled at a lot in college football when you put out rankings. I'm pretty aware of that, and I guess you succumb to the pressure sometimes.
What made you get into this? The numbers and stats and stuff like that. What was there something as you were growing up that you just got interested in as a fan, wanting to make it better? What was your interest initially in analytics and data?
Well, it's funny. I mean, the line I always give is that back when I started writing about football, about college football, after the message board days, when I moved on to blogs, the hardcore blog days. I always liked baseball stats, but I hated baseball. So, let's come up with something interesting for the college football time to fill the very long off season. That's where the seed was planted, and then started just kind of figuring things out from there. Went to Football Outsiders in 2008. Started doing full time stuff for SB Nation a few years later. But yeah, it just evolved from. The writing always came first, but I've always been pretty good with numbers, and I just like having the backup of numbers to make sure that, if nothing else, that I know what I'm talking about, that I can kind of back up what my opinions are, or if I need to change my opinions in that regard. So that's kind of where it started.
Bill, I think if we applied baseball stats to everything, if there's a way to do that, baseball has that right, because you can't pretend that you're a 330 hitter when you're a 250 hitter. There's no illusion to it. It is what you say you are. Restaurant recommendations. What's the batting average? Look, I think they should do it for politicians. My gosh, could you imagine going up in a debate and seeing 200 hitters up there? You're like, get these guys out of here. Bring me some 300 hitters up here into this debate. But if you do apply that to, if you have that kind of look at college football, it does, even though I know it's complicated to get there, doesn't it simplify what we're looking at?
It does to it. I mean, I've been able to figure out the sustainable aspects of the sport. That's really what it comes down to. And obviously, with a sport like baseball, where everything's measurable, it's a lot easier. But it turns out the most predictive piece of a sport is the success rate measure that I talk a lot about. Just how often are you gaining 5 yards on first down, or 70% of your second down yardage, or converting third and fourth downs. Just that little thing. The big plays are sometimes kind of random. Turnovers are extremely random. But the little controllable aspects, you start to look at the game a little bit different, just from what are teams doing that's real, that they can keep doing over and over again, and what was just kind of weird randomness. I love the randomness. It's great it's very entertaining, but it sure doesn't help you predict football games very well.
So did they get it right last night, in your opinion?
Seemed like it. I was shocked by where Clemson ranked last week. I thought that was a massive misfire. There was just no way to rationalize Clemson being that far ahead of TCU, among other things. And I think Clemson's still a little bit too high. It's just not as big a deal when they're 10th. This time, I mean, like I said, the formula that I was working with yesterday, it had the same top 9, and I kind of liked the way that top 9 looked. The 4 unbeaten being at the top, and the 2 teams that are unbeaten except for Georgia. It all kind of makes sense. It's cleaner than most of the rankings we've seen.
Bill Connelly, again, ESPN. If you want to go to ESPN, it's I think some of your stuff, is it ESPN Insider, or is a lot of it still right there on ESPN.com?
Most of the football stuff is E+ at this point, which is kind of they let me get weird since it's E+. They go a little deeper sometimes, so I don't mind.
All right, one more thing, if you don't mind. You have the S&P, the power rankings or whatever. Mm-hmm. Which team that's not even close to being a part of the college football standings, as far as, let's say, the top 10 or 12 teams, which team do you have rank much higher than where they are in the BCS standings?
Yeah, same as FPI at the moment, in that the computers love Texas. They're kind of the ultimate example of a team that, if this was a 162-game season, they'd easily be the favorite to win the Big 12. But they've had this little funky close game problem at times, and they've lost some games they shouldn't. And so therefore they're this 3-loss team that's really high, and it drives everybody crazy. because we're in such a small sample sport. But that's the one, and that's why we see that with Vegas too. That Texas a touchdown favorite over TCU. My numbers don't like Texas quite that much, so I know there are others that are even more on that side. But that's definitely the team. Seeing a 6-3 Texas in the middle of all these undefeated and one-loss teams feels very weird for sure.
Well, yeah, they have been high for you. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask him the question. You wrote the article about things you got wrong. You were a year early. You thought TCU was really good a year ago, and ultimately proved that Gary Patterson and the team were kind of tired of each other, and now they've got some new life. And you were right just a year late.
That's right, and I ended up being wrong twice because I saw some other people talking themselves into TCU heading into the year, and it's like, nope, I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to fall for it again. And then I should have fallen for it because I would have been right the second time.
Yeah, the Texas thing, probably a lot of people look at that and go, it's the logo, it's the tradition, but this is data, right? The spitting all this out. Yeah.
Right. And those preseason projections that are still a little bit in the numbers, obviously recruiting rankings play that role, but this is not, they were projected in the 20s, I think. They are where they are because down for down and drive for drive, they've been a very, very good football team this year. And I mean, you think about it, like, took an injury and a couple of bad breaks to lose to Alabama. It took, 6 fourth down conversions for them to lose to Texas Tech. That's not a sustainable recipe. It's taken a lot for them to lose 3 games. They've been a lot closer to being a lot better. That's why they rank really high.
Hey, Bill, great stuff. Thank you so much for jumping on with us and explaining what you have. It's a great story. I wish they would go to some sort of, at least whatever the amount or portion or percentage of anything with a computer. I love the human element, but I think that would help maybe offset a little bit of too much what seems to be, And again, people would complain and bitch about that as well. So who knows?
They probably would. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it, buddy. Good to have you.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Thank
Bill
you.
Connelly, ESPN.com _